All right, it's about time we go ahead and begin this evening. If you want to go ahead and turn in your Bibles to Psalm 10. As we look at this psalm this evening, this is an interesting blend of a lament, as well as by the time we get to the end of the psalm, we'll be looking at the prospect of divine judgment. God is eternal, and that we have a righteous king. And so it'll be interesting to see as David is writing this, how he's going to ask a question at the beginning of it, and then he's going to have a lament for a while, and then we'll come to the end, and there'll be a different feeling when we get to the end of this psalm. It does pick up an acrostic definition in terms of its connectedness to Psalm 9, and Ryan was talking about that last week. And so it uses a letter of the Hebrew alphabet for each of the verses, and so it'll pick up with the 12th letter. Not that I will help you with that tonight, but if you wanted to do some research and look into that, they are connected, Psalm 9 and Psalm 10. But let's read the psalm together, just because I want to make sure we get through all of it before we dive into each of the verses. Psalm 10. Why do you stand afar off, O Lord? Why do you hide yourself in times of trouble? In pride, the wicked hotly pursue the afflicted. Let them be caught in the plots which they have devised. For the wicked boast of the heart's desire. The greedy man curses and spurns the Lord. The wicked in the haughtiness of his countenance do not seek him. All of his thoughts are, there is no God. His ways prosper at all times. Your judgments are on high, out of his sight. As for all his adversary, he snorts at them. He says to himself, I will not be moved. Throughout all generations, there will not be adversity. His mouth is full of curses and deceit and oppression. Under his tongue is mischief and wickedness. He sits in the lurking places of the villages. In the hiding places, he kills the innocent. His eyes stealthily watch for the unfortunate. He lurks in a hiding place as a lion in his lair. He lurks to catch the afflicted. He catches the afflicted when he draws himself into his net. He crouches and bows down, and the unfortunate fall by his mighty ones. He says to himself, God has forgotten, and he has hidden his face, and he will never see it. Arise, O Lord, O God, lift up your hand. Do not forget the afflicted. Why has the wicked spurned God? And he has said to himself, you will not require it. You have not seen it, for you have beheld mischief and vexation to take into your hand. The unfortunate commits himself to you, and you have been the helper of the orphan. Break the arm of the wicked and the evildoer. Seek out his wickedness until you find none. The Lord is king forever and ever. Nations have perished from his land. O Lord, you have heard the desire of the humble. You will strengthen their heart. You will incline your ear to vindicate the orphan and the oppressed, so that man who is of the earth will no longer cause terror. Psalm 10 begins with a sort of timeless question that I think there are times in our lives that we have asked. When the wicked prosper and there is no justice, when the prayers go unanswered, where is God? And I believe that's where David asks himself as he begins this first verse, asking, why do you stand afar off, O Lord? Why do you hide yourself in times of trouble? David seems to be bothered by perhaps the aloofness of God, and that the wicked themselves seem to be prospering. And so as he begins to describe what's going on, when we talk about God, usually God is sitting on his throne. Instead, he describes him as standing afar off. Because why do you hide yourself when typically he's standing in the presence or sitting in the presence of Israel? Instead, he's hiding himself, or at least seemingly hiding himself in times of trouble. Trying to get caught up here. Maybe. One more. Let's go. There's not wanting to catch up. Here we go. So why do you hide yourselves in the time of trouble? Instead, when we looked at Psalm 9, it talked about the stronghold. That's where we look to God as the stronghold in these times of trouble. Instead, David sees it almost the exact opposite. So he has these times of suffering. But the application that I think we need to look at here is that the times in which perhaps God is, and I guess in your mind, not listening, is it because sin has separated us from him? Have you chosen a path that perhaps is away from him? Is it simply just not in God's time? And I think that's one of the things that David has to look at here. Because what we do need to be reminded of in Romans 8, in verse 38, it says, nothing can separate us from the love of God. But sometimes it's not on our schedule. And I think that's what David is going to be reminded of here. I think he's going to focus on the wicked here as described in verses 2 through 11. And he's going to describe some things about the wicked and the ungodly and what are some of the characteristics of the ungodly. One of the first characteristics that we see is that one of the characteristics of the ungodly is that it's in their pride. The word pride there, you just can't stay caught up on the wireless. I should have gone ahead and put it on the machine up front. And then picking up in verse 2, it says, in the pride the wicked have hotly pursued the afflicted, and they caught them in the plots that they have desired. The word pride there is to describe the sort of greatness or the majesty normally is described to God, but here they're taking pride in the sort of wickedness that they have. And it's not that they're pursuing after the people that they're afflicting. It says that they are hotly pursuing them. They are intensely causing the suffering of the people and of the helpless. As pride becomes the characteristics, we look in verse 3, the wicked boast of his heart's desire, and the greedy man curses and spurns the Lord. So this person isn't even bothered or concerned to sort of conceal his wickedness. He boasts of his wickedness. And it's not just that's his character, but that's in his heart, is that he is this man of wickedness. Studied earlier in the third psalm, and it talked about the desire. It says, when a woman saw that the tree was good for food and it was a delight in her eyes, the tree was desirable to make one wise. That's what this man is doing. He's looking for that desire to be wicked, and David is sort of pointing that out. So why is this person so wicked they would openly boast about being greedy, the schemes that they have against the poor?
Because it all seems to go unpunished.
It does. And what we're going to wind up seeing here is, at the first of this section of verses, he's going to say there is no God. And that's why he can do all of these things. We're going to see by the time you get down to verse 11 or so, he's going to at least say that there's a God, but he's going to say it's because God doesn't listen. God is not there. There's not going to be any ramifications in terms of how he acts. And so we can see that as this wicked person and the haughtiness that he has, he doesn't seek after God, doesn't seek after those things. And all of his thoughts are, there is no God. And because that's his thoughts, he can do whatever he chooses to do. And as he afflicts these people, oppresses these people, it's because he feels there is no God. And there will be no ramification for his decisions and how he treats people. Other thoughts or comments? Oh, yeah,
How
Jimmy.
frustrating it must be for someone he looks around to Josh's point, it's going unpunished, right?
Yeah.
You know, we have this sense of what's fair and what's right, and when we see that clearly that's going sideways, I mean, it really gets under skin. We talk about living in this country, how,
Right.
you know, we're so proud of our rights and our freedoms, and, you know, they're not gonna be abridged, and you're not gonna tread on me, that whole mindset.
Right.
But it's ironic that you see someone expressing, God, why are you so far off? You should be on top of this. You should be addressing this. You should be putting an end to this. And it's ironic that the people that are sort of walking around going, hey, there's no God, we're not worried. No one's here to punish me. People that are afflicted, I'm going to make it even worse for them.
Right.
The righteous see that, and it really, you're like, God doesn't like this. This is not the way it's intended to be.
Right.
And we allow those people to influence us to suddenly start thinking, God's not here. You know, we have to be careful about that. We live in a world where all around us there are people that say there is no God, and we look around and we see, hey, there's fairness that's not there as far as we're concerned.
Right.
But we lose sight of the fact that God is long suffering, He's patient. He wants those very same people to come to their senses and not influence us to start thinking, where are you, God?
Right.
It is
Right.
ironic how much influence those people have over God's people. They even get
Right.
us going,
Right.
where are you, God?
Exactly. Because again, all you can see is that they prosper, right? And in how they can act wicked, and we're like, God, why can you not stop this? And then they could then turn and go, see, there is no God. So I can act however I want. And you're just like, that's not the case. But again, we're wanting things to happen on our time and not God's time. Other thoughts or comments? We're also going to see, though, that this idea of that there is no God, by the time we get down, as I said earlier, verse 11 and verse 13, it's somewhat just bravado of these evil people, because they sort of contradict themselves as you get further into this psalm, because they're eventually going to say that God does exist. He just isn't reacting to what's going on. And because he doesn't, I can still act however I want. And so whether or not they're purely an atheist and just choose that there is no God so I can live however I want, it really then becomes that God is just forgotten. And that's what he's going to eventually get to. He's going to admit that there's a God, but then that doesn't still change how he acts, doesn't change that he will still oppress people. But we will see a change in this psalm as we get further along. If we move on to the 5th verse, his ways prosper at all times. Your judgments are on high, out of his sight. For all of his adversary, he snorts at them. Why does he believe that God is nowhere to be found? Tells us right there, right? Why? Because he prospers. There's no God to be found. I can still act the way I want. I can steal from these other people. I can oppress these people for my own good. And he does that because he prospers. And that's the way he's going to treat people. We're going to see that there's, as he does these things, why do the wicked prosper? Well, that's the reason why they do those wicked things, is because they choose to prosper. And having failed to see that God is not going to avenge, at least in their time, what they're seeing, your judgments are on high, out of his sight. So the wicked person doesn't see the activities of God. And so it just causes them to just to snort at any adversaries that they may have. Anybody who, I guess, tries to prevent perhaps that evil from going on, he just sort of snorts in sort of derision. But he says to them, I will not be moved. Throughout all generations, I will not be in adversity. And so he looks at where he is in his life, and things for his life, there's not adversity, and he will not allow that adversity to come. But in doing that, it creates a sort of false security. In Psalm, in the 6th verse there, where it talks about, he says to himself, I will not be moved throughout all generations. I will not be in adversity. Nothing will ever shake me. And again, because he is not looking at this from a spiritual perspective, he takes on this sort of false security. Verse 7, his mouth is full of curses and deceit and oppression. Under his tongue is mischief and wickedness. So this covers what's the sort of wickedness that he has. We're going to see that this is all coming from his heart. And once we allow the sort of wickedness that's there, the heart, the thoughts that they have, it's going to wind up influencing your behavior. And that's what we find of this evil man. Thoughts or comments before we? Yeah, Bruce.
You know, the thing comes to mind, God sends rain on the just and on the unjust. And that's where the unjust, that's his perspective here. It's the here and now. What's going to happen to me now? I can do whatever I want to.
Right.
He's not looking for the hereafter. He's not looking for what happens after he dies here on this earth.
Right.
He completely, like you said, it takes no spiritual, he sees nothing spiritual in this.
Right.
And that's the way the wicked are. They're looking for whatever suits their needs right now.
Right now. Yeah.
What's going to happen to me when I die? That never enters their mind.
That's right. Right. Other thoughts or comments? Again, the idea that his mouth is full of curses and deceit and oppression, that's his true character. And so when he opens his mouth, whatever is in his heart is what is coming out. His chief weapon that he's going to use, evidently, is his tongue. And so he's going to use that tongue to sort of intimidate, to mislead, to force submission. And that's how this wicked person oppresses the weak. And so that person who denies God, despises God, denies any accountability for his actions, and he boasts of being the sort of victor as he oppresses the wicked or the weaker person. And he does it at their expense and then gains and prospers from them, whether that's in sort of business dealings that they have, whether it's in sort of social aspects. That's what we're seeing of this person who is afflicting the weak. We're also going to see that they tend to be violent in some way. If we pick up in verses 8 through 10, he sits in lurking places of the village. In the hiding places, he kills the innocent. His eyes stealthily watch for the unfortunate. He lurks in a hiding place as a lion in his lair. He lurks to catch the afflicted. He catches the afflicted when draws him into his net. And he crouches and bows down, and the unfortunate falls by his mighty ones. Things to sort of think about here, whether the idea of kill is literally a sort of slaying or not. We think about, and again, this led to, I guess, a slaying. But when you use things to your advantage, and if you think of in 1 Kings, the 21st chapter, where Jezebel is wanting to get the vineyard of Naboth for Ahab. And what does she devise? Well, she devises a way to write letters in Ahab's name, seal them with his seal, send them to the elders and the nobles who were living with Naboth in his city. And they wanted them to proclaim a fast and seat Naboth at the head of the people, and then have two worthless men before him testify against him, saying, "You cursed God, the king, and they took him out and stoned him. And so whether or not it's truly that person responsible for slaying someone, killing someone, as he says, the innocent, or whether they're responsible for it and find ways in which those things could be done, that's that wicked person. They are lying and hiding places, looking for the innocent to slay. And that's what David is sort of seeing, the sort of life under the sun at that particular time. He's seeing the injustice that's going on, and that's why is this lament to God that we see here in Psalm 10. And just the ways in which he that goes about catching them, those who are unfortunate. The idea also that it's somewhat in secrecy as well, right? He describes it as in lurking places, in hiding places, stealthily watching for them. That's what we see that this evil person is doing. And so he's hiding and looking for those people that he can take advantage of. But we're also going to see that it is a false hope that these wicked people have. He goes on to say in verse 11, he says to himself, God has forgotten. He has hidden his face. He will never see it. So it's gone from the original verse, where in verse 4, where he was talking about there is no God, to now, okay, well, there is a God, but the God has forgotten us. He has hidden his face. He's never going to see the things that I'm doing, the wicked things that I'm doing. But again, it creates a false hope for themselves. Thoughts or comments? Yeah, Jim.
I can't help but think, in instances where someone's up to no good, one of the first things they do, they like to sort of look around and see, hey, is anybody watching? That goes with it. I mean, someone's going to, steal something from somebody, they're looking, hey, what's my best opportunity? Is anybody watching here? It is interesting that in this situation, this person has this idea that, oh, well, God's not paying attention. He's not going to see this, which is so delusional. If you know God and his character at all, you recognize that he sees everything.
Right.
And so it's a reminder, sobering reminder to us that even we as Christians at times can lose sight of that. And, we're thinking we're getting away with it. We're getting away with it because, that's what Josh said, we're going unpunished right now. It hasn't been found out.
Right.
But I can't help but think of how far away the world is in understanding just how powerful God is, that he sees everything. There is no word that's spoken that he doesn't hear, or deed that is done that he is not aware of. We convince ourselves that he can't see us, and makes us feel a little more comfortable about doing those kinds of things, but he sees it all.
That's right. Right. Becky?
This is just the opposite of Christ.
Right.
I mean, because Christ came, and who did he go to? The weak, the downtrodden, the poor, the women.
Right.
And it's just such an opposite thing. It also makes me think of even today, the people who have, I'm not saying all the people who have a lot of money, but people who have more than they need are looking for the helpless people that they can pick on and take
Right,
them in the
right.
forefront. And it's just sad.
It is, and it hasn't changed. I mean, David's seeing it at that time, right? He's seeing that those who perhaps prospered at the expense of the weak, at the expense of the downtrodden, and we see the same thing today. It hasn't changed. Those who don't have God as their focus, those same people exist today. But what David is trying to remind us, and as he writes this lament to God, is that those people also have this false hope in doing that. Because while they may act as if there is no God, they're coming to the resolution that, okay, God's just forgotten us, and as was already pointed out, it may seem that God has forgotten because you haven't been punished for it. But eternally, there will be something that you will have to then give account for. So we look in verse 12. Arise, O Lord, O God, lift up your hand. Do not forget the afflicted. And so there's a switch here, a tone, I guess, in this psalm, because now it's going to be the reaction to the things that he has seen, the fact that it seems like these prayers have sort of gone unanswered. And so what can the wicked or the afflicted, what can the afflicted learn in these times of persecution? And so God is going to do something. How is this going to happen? So he's asking God to lift up your hand and do not forget the afflicted. And so as he does this, he's David, also being a sort of man of action, we can see that he's asking and reaching out to God to lift up your hand. Again, the hand, when we talk about it a lot of times, that's where the power is, and he's asking him to lift up his hand. Do not forget the afflicted. In the previous verse, the way it was described is that God had forgotten them. And what David is now saying is, do not forget the afflicted. Why has the wicked spurned God? He says to himself, you will not require it. You have seen it, for you have beheld mischief and vexation to be taken into your hand. The unfortunate commits himself to you. You have been the helper of the orphan. Break the arm of the wicked, the evildoer. Seek out his wickedness until you find none. So one of these things, he says, sees what God is going to do. You have seen it, for you have beheld the mischief and the vexation. We're going to see that as he describes this here, is he's the helper of the orphan, those who are unfortunate. And so that's how he's describing those people who have been oppressed. And so why would you describe them as the orphan, right? Those are the ones that are helpless, right? And that's what David is sort of pointing out, is those who have been afflicted, those who have been oppressed. It's that orphan, and that God is going to be able to help them. And as he describes it, does it seem like it is a fairly, harsh statement, I guess? If we look in verse 15, we haven't caught up on the screen here yet. Break the arm of the wicked and the evildoer. Seek out his wickedness until you find none. What does he mean by break the arm? Step in and do something, right?
And this isn't the first time in the Psalms we're going to see
Right.
this sort of idea of an appeal to God to bring
Justice,
when
yeah.
we first read it, we're like, wait a minute, this is a man after God's own heart. But that's a real feeling for us.
Right.
And we're seeing that on these words. This is how we feel. We look around and we see it, and we do want God to intervene. We want him to put an end to the wickedness that we see
Right.
all around us. We
Right.
can't help but feel that way. If we're going to be like him, then we feel the same way about all this injustice and sin and wickedness that he does. So, it's natural for us to voice that and
Right.
to ask God to, sometimes we get a little carried away. We want it for personal and selfish reasons
Right.
versus, godly reasons. We've got to check ourselves then.
Right.
But it's a natural feeling to look around and see that. In
Sure. And again, I think David is pointing out, and again, how these words sort of come to us, and how we're trying to understand, as this seems sort of unloving, the way it's sort of written there. But the idea of the arm, metaphorically, is talking about where that power is held by the evil one. And so David is asking God to just simply destroy their ability to attack and to continue to have their schemes. Break the arm would then render them to sort of lift their hand against those people who were helpless. And so I think that's the plea that David is asking for. And to seek out his wickedness until you find none. And so, again, this is this plea for God to step in. And he's seen this thing. He's seen the wicked prosper. He's seen the oppression that they have caused, the helpless. And he's just asking them to to break that arm, to limit that power that they have until that wickedness you find none. And then it turns into the idea that there's going to be this judgment that's going to come, that the Lord is king forever and ever. The nations have perished from his land. This psalm that started off with an idea of lament, of despair, it ends in confidence that God is sovereign, he is powerful. And so that's where we're going to see David end at the end of this psalm. O Lord, you have heard the desire of the humble. You have strengthened their heart. You will incline their ear. Again, when we talked about it before, at the beginning of this psalm, it was as if God was not listening at all. And so what he's saying now is, no, you have heard the desire of the humble. You have strengthened their heart. You will incline your ear to them. And so this is that desire that David is asking for, and the confidence now that he is writing by the time we get to the end of this psalm, that you will incline your ear, you will strengthen them. Thoughts or comments? Yeah, Jimmy?
I know we don't know this, but as I think about David writing this and knowing David's origin story and all that happened to David, if you go all the way back to the beginning of this and you talk about him thinking about God, but he's not there, there were times very much in David's life where he felt that way. And it talks about in the pride the wicked hotly pursued the afflicted. He was afflicted, he was pursued. Saul and his army are after him. And even in this, let them be caught in the plots which they have devised. I can't help but think of that in the light of David plotting. You know, and I think about, now I don't know the timing of this and what the circumstances were, but boy, wouldn't it be amazing if David, even in his situation thinking, God, where are you? Then he calls to mind, you know, I was there. I was this person. So rather than it sort of being an appeal from a person who can't relate to this, David can relate. This was me at one time.
Right.
I was devising plots, and I should be caught in them, and I was caught in them. The next says, for the wicked boast of his heart's desire. Ultimately, it was his desires that led him to get into trouble. You know, so I can't help but think all of that playing into the emotions that go into him writing this psalm.
Sure.
And then also looking at it from the perspective, from a worldly sense. You know, God, there's so much injustice. Come quickly. You know.
Right.
Put an end to this. And at the end of this idea of seek out his wickedness until you find none, and then so that man who is of the earth will no longer cause terror. Just makes me think of when Jesus returns, that's what will happen.
Yeah.
There won't be any more wickedness. That will be an end, a final end to the wickedness that we see around us, and there will no longer be a man of the earth that causes terror. God will put an end to all of that.
Right.
What a great thing.
Sure. And again, I think what we have to do to tie in what Jimmy just said is we have to then get to that point after we've had the despair, after we've had the lament. We have to get to that point where we allow ourselves to be strengthened, right? We can't continue to fall into that despair. We have to allow and know that God is hearing us. He may not be answering us in the time that we want, but we need to know that he hears us. Whether it is now that we're going to see that vindication or whether it is at the end, that vindication will come, and we just have to have that confidence as David did. Bruce?
And looking back, talking about the transitions in this psalm, as he starts off and asking, why do you stand afar off, O Lord? Why are you so far away? Why aren't you on top of this taking care of it?
Yeah.
And then the wicked, he says, there is no God. But then, verse 11, it says, he said in his heart, God is forgotten. He hides his face. He will never see. Well, there may be a God, but he won't ever see what I'm doing. And then, down in verse 13, why do the wicked renounce God? He has said in his heart, you will not require an account. You're not going to hold me accountable. Immediately then, David says in verse 14, but you have seen. The wicked may say that you won't hold me accountable.
Right.
You won't ever see this. And he says here in verse 14, but you have seen. You observe trouble and grief. You pay it by your hand. The helpless commits himself to you. you're the helper of the fatherless. So
Right.
it turns that all around.
Yep.
I don't care what the wicked may have in their heart, what they may think, what they may claim.
Right.
It's going to all come.
That's right. That's right. And then the last the verse, to vindicate the orphan and the oppressed, so that the man who is of the earth will no longer cause terror. Of course, in Ryan's class, he likes to tie the words that we find there to aspects of Jesus. And so in the words that he begins to put together for this one, in verse 1, where it talks about as being forsaken, feeling like you're alone, God is not listening, we find the same experiences that Jesus had, where he felt as if he were forsaken by God. My God, why have you forsaken me? From Matthew 27. An experience that he was forsaken by man. In Luke 23, where all of his acquaintances, the women who accompanied him from Galilee, were standing at a distance and seeing things. And so again, he finds himself forsaken. A little bit of skipping around a little bit just so we can get through them. In verse 5, hopefully the screen will catch up here in a second. The injustice that Jesus had to undergo when we see where Pilate and the political success that he was sort of looking for. Pilate made the effort to release him, but the Jews cried out, if you release this man, you're no friend of Caesar. Everyone who makes himself out to be a king opposes Caesar. Therefore, when Pilate heard these things, he brought Jesus out, sat him down at the judgment seat of the pavement. And anyway, so the idea that, again, there was injustice that was done, and it was done, and Jesus was able to feel that. And then even at the cross, where the people stood by looking and jeering at him, sneering at him, claiming that he saved others, let him save himself, if this is the Christ of God, the chosen one. And then there was deception that was used. We talked about the wicked in this particular psalm and how they used his tongue and the words to be able to oppress people for their own gain. We see the deception that was used to address Jesus, where they were finding ways in which the chief priest and the elders and the people gathered together at the court of the high priest and plotted together to deceive Jesus by stealth and to kill him. And Romans 3, those mouths of cursing and bitterness. Again, those are the things that we can see that Jesus underwent as well. And they sought him by stealth. I mean, we find that they were looking for ways in which they could take Jesus. Again, that lurking in the villages as the wicked man was described in Psalm 10. And even how arresting him in the garden, again, trying to take him without sort of incident. And then Jesus talked that God would not forget the afflicted. Matthew 5 and verse 5, blessed are the gentle, for they shall inherit the earth. God raised Jesus, or caused Jesus to arise. In verse 16, Jesus, the King of the Jews, above his head they put this name, Jesus, King of the Jews. Judgment will happen on the nations. Matthew 13, the Son of Man was sent forth, his angels, and he will gather out his kingdom of all the stumbling blocks and those who commit lawlessness. Thank you for your comments tonight. I think Ryan will post his class information to the website if you want to do some more research on this particular psalm. Thank you.